Oh, hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. I, of course, am Mr. Warren Hayes, and that means that it is time once again to talk about pro wrestling right here on youtube.com/Mr. Warren Hayes or on your favorite podcast application. Wherever you decide to jump in, to chime in, to, well, not chime in because it's a recording, but whenever you decide to allow me into your personal lives, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. A like on YouTube and a review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify would help out tremendously. Well, that would be a nice little retro action, a little something that you could give to me. I would appreciate a great deal. That would go a long way. That would make me all feel warm and fuzzy inside, especially when it's this freaking cold across North America. It feels like, or at least in the US and Canada, it's just nuts, man. But so, you want to give me the warm fuzzies. That's what you want to do. You want to give me the warm fuzzies. You want to make sure that I don't die of frostbite. So like the stuff, if you don't mind. We've got ourselves a good show for you today. Of course, we've got some little bits and bobs of news, a few stream highlights this week. We're going to talk about the Britt Baker rumors. We're just all over the place. PCO. We're going to talk about PCO and the surprising destruction of at least attempted destruction of the TNA social media championship over there at GCW, the People versus GCW show that happened earlier this weekend. So we're going to talk about those events, and we're going to talk some TNA wrestling. We're going to do a bit of a postmortem for TNA and sort of postmortem regarding 2024 and looking forward as to what's going to happen in TNA. And I'm going to be joined by Mike Gilbert of the Mike and JD show to do exactly that. Mike is very knowledgeable when it comes to TNA Pro Wrestling. So I couldn't think of a better person to break all of this stuff down with. It's going to be tremendous. And it just so happened, just for a little peek behind the curtain, Mike and I had set up a date to do the recording, and which was last Thursday, or about a week ago. And it turns out that the day we were recording was the same day that TNA and WWE officially announced their partnership, like made it official in that press release they sent out. So we were raring to go, and it's a good talk. It's a good show once again this week. Thank you very much for being here. Let's just get right to it. So here's a topic we haven't talked about in a while here on the Mr. Warren Hayes Show, TNA wrestling. There's a lot of stuff happening in TNA, and it's with the new year, we got to reflect on what's happening. We got to look forward. We just got to focus and refocus and do a nice little post-mortem, I guess, to a degree. And I don't think I'd have a better person to do it with than Mike Gilbert of the Mike and JD show. A guy whose heart is so huge that he has accepted to watch and analyze and break down TNA for us so that we don't have to. Goddamn, Mike Gilbert, it's so nice to have you, man.
It's great to be on here, man. It's been a while since we've had the chance to chat, and when you gave me the opportunity, I was really excited about it. So yeah, dude, let's do this thing, man. I'm really happy to talk to you.
I'm really excited too. You had me on last year, and I've been wanting to there's some guests, like let's say Chris Samsa. I'll have him on anytime. It doesn't matter. But Mike Gilbert, you bring him in for big things. You bring him in for the big reasons, right? And since we're starting off the new year, I figured that it'd be fun to have a bit of a talk, just to go over, kind of like an overview of what happened in TNA last year, some projections into the future. And look, full disclosure, a peek behind the curtain, actually. We're recording this on January 16, which is the day that some big news dropped as well. So everything sort of coalesced really, really well here. So we've got a lot to talk about. So let's begin. Let's start going down. If we talk about some big picture topics that happened in 2023 for Impact or for TNA, but which that's actually the first topic I want to talk about. The rebranding from Impact to TNA. That was something that got people really excited at the end of 2023. Then it happened officially in 2024. How do you think that went, Mike, overall?
Nah, it's so funny. So I actually and I clipped the video and I re-released it not too long ago for the YouTube, but I was doing a live stream on my channel during Bound for Glory of 2023.
Sure.
And because they're teasing this big announcement, I'll be honest, I thought that the big announcement was going to be Okada's coming to TNA to do some shots, right? That ended
Okay.
up being true, right? So and I had like I was live, I was like, and I made sure to go live before everybody else did. So I was live during the pay-per-view at the very end of it because I was trying to get ahead of Fightful and all these other guys that are doing their live streams.
Sure.
So I had my tablet up and I'm watching this thing and I'm getting my live reaction. I completely shit all over the idea of them going back to TNA because I really liked TNA when they first came out because I thought they were just like super unique and different, and I liked the X Division and I liked all the I liked wacky stuff that they were doing. And then when Hogan and Bischoff came in, it kind of destroyed my love for TNA. And then so from like 2011 on, I was just like in and out, right?
Sure.
Sometimes they would hook me back every once in a while with a big match or a big storyline, and then
So you had bad vibes with TNA, basically, is what you're saying.
honestly, I always thought the name TNA was pretty stupid. I was like, how are you going to be an adult and tell your family you're going to go watch tits and ass wrestling? I just didn't think that was like a viable idea.
Sure.
Right. So,
yeah.
And then they're bringing it back in 2023. I was like, this whole idea is stupid. Nobody's going to want to watch tits and ass wrestling. I was like, what am I going to change the name of my podcast to Brace for Tits and Ass? Like, how am I going to tell my wife this? Like, I got a daughter. I can't do this. Right. So, and I'm like processing all these emotions. And somebody then reached out to me, like a big fan who was like 12 years old when TNA was like in their heyday of like 2010, 2011, right? And like TNA was their favorite promotion. They didn't know that that's what TNA meant. And like
right.
it turns out most people that are like, 10 years younger than me, they have never heard that term other than when it relates to TNA wrestling.
Sure.
So it just turns out that I'm a fucking dinosaur. It's kind of what I learned in that moment, like through that week. And then all of the OG TNA fans were so excited about this. They've been wanting to go back for so long. And then all this buzz and like there's this groundswell of support. A lot of people are like, I'm gonna go back to watching TNA now that they've changed their name, right? Like
that was me.
They're like, I'm gonna give this a real shot. And so then I started to change my opinion. And I had to admit on the air that, and this doesn't happen often, Warren, I was wrong about something. Like it really doesn't happen that often when it comes to my wrestling takes. I'm usually like batting 1,000 typically, but this one I completely whiffed on because it worked. It really did work. They went into Hard to Kill in 2024 and generated the biggest pay-per-view number that they've ever done in the history of the company. They beat Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe. Some people will tell you that it's not true, but Dave Meltzer is the only guy that's counting this shit. And he said that no, they did like 65,000 pay-per-view buys, right?
That's tremendous.
Just off of the rebrand alone. So that alone is a major success. Here's what happened though. Sure. I thought Hard to Kill was a pretty good show. It wasn't a blowaway show. I thought it was pretty good, right? Then they go into the Impact tapings after that, and I thought the Impact tapings were fine. Again, Will Ospreay and Josh Alexander, probably the best match in TNA history, in my opinion. So they had that going for them. So lots of buzz coming out of that. 2 weeks later, they go into Kissimmee, Florida, and some shithole like rundown armory, and it immediately looks like the skeleton. When D'Amore took over and Callis took over, and then they stripped the company down to the studs. It looked like Impact Wrestling again with the TNA logo. And then shortly after that, he had gotten fired. Yeah. Now it turns out heading into Hard to Kill, he already knew he was being fired because the relationship had gotten contentious for a while. And they realized, at least in their opinion, right? I don't know the difference, but in their opinion, they felt like he was incompetent. And if they were really going to go to the next level, they just couldn't do it with him as the president. Right. And so we started off hot, and then like D'Amore, like they go to Kissimmee and the tapings look like shit. And then we take a big dip, right? And D'Amore gets fired, morale's down, Motor City Machine Guns are leaving, Josh Alexander wants out of his contract. All this stuff starts happening, and then all of a sudden it's like this, like boom, TNA going, like everybody TNA LOL, TNA going out of business. You can take the TNA out of TNA, or you can take the TNA out of Impact, or whatever the saying was going. Like a lot of people pronounce the company dead. And it was like a tumultuous time for the company. It was a tough being a TNA podcaster because I'll be honest, AEW podcasters, they actually do really well if they are rallying against that company, right? If they're grifting, if they're saying mean things about Tony Khan, if they're using all
Yeah.
the
Yes.
unflattering images on thumbnails, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
that's when they get their biggest numbers.
Yeah.
What I have learned is if I'm when I'm more positive about TNA, that's when I get more support. It's the weirdest thing. These hardcore TNA faithful, they love this company so much, they will support you if you're saying mostly nice things about it. And so that was getting tough. My numbers were dwindling because I was shitting on the company. So it was getting to be tough. And I'm not going to lie to the audience. I have to be honest. So, um,
Yeah,
but then
you're not on the grift. You have analysis and standards that you want to
yeah,
convey, and
yeah.
that's fair.
That doesn't mean I'm not gonna get funky with my thumbnails every once in a while and get a little clickbaity headline. I'm not, as long as I'm not
Hey,
lying, I think I'm fair game, right?
don't blame the player. Am I right?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah. Like, I have been guilty of throwing Tony Khan's dumb face on a thumbnail, but I was also, in the context of the video, me and JD were actively like saying, hey, like this sucks, right?
sure.
And it's his fault. So that's when we were doing it. So like, look, I'm not saying I'm better than everybody else. I just, as long as I'm being honest, I think it's fair game, right?
Right.
Um, so they dip down and the company's back to Impact Wrestling and it just not doing so well. And then of course the summer everything changed during the
Right.
summer.
Well, let's start with The Office during the summer, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
right? Scott Demore left. He was replaced by Anthony Ciccione. Is that how you pronounce it? I think.
Yeah, Chichoni, I say chon chon, which is
That's right.
in Spanish means like sex, right? So if you ever
That
seen American Me, like you guys understand the scene, a very famous scene from my childhood, 1980s Hispanic movies. I grew up in California, so but so so technically he took over the president of TNA, right?
right.
But really, the guy that took over for D'Amore his name is Ariel Schneer. He is kind of like, so Scott D'Amore was wearing multiple hats. They gave him the title of TNA president. They immediately regretted it, by the way, but they gave him the title of TNA president. Um, but really, he was acting in the Triple H role, right? Triple H is the chief of content, right?
Okay.
So that was Scott D'Amore. And Ariel Schneer has now taken over that position in the company. He's running the day-to-day operations. Anthony Ciccione took over as president of Anthem Sports, and TNA was under his purview, right? So he was technically the
Okay.
president of Anthem Sports, and the president of TNA. He has since moved over into a different part of the company. I don't know what he's doing now. And Carlos Silva has been hired and he's been brought over. And so now he
Mm-hmm.
is technically, so Ariel Schneer then answers to Carlos Silva. Carlos Silva is like in the umbrella. He's like up here in the hierarchy. Anthem Sports, he's in charge. So Anthem Sports, you're talking TNA, talking Invicta, talking all that, right? And then above him would be Leonard Asper out of beautiful Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
Oh yes, it's just a wonderful place. Well, where does Rob Kilgman fit into all this? Right, like he's the chief revenue officer,
Yeah.
and he's made a lot of people, I think, feel that he's at the core kind of all of the business and talent, the business decisions and talent cuts that happen throughout 2024. Is he anything? Is he significant in this or?
I don't know. I think as the chief financial officer, it's his job to go like make
Yeah,
money and
go
and
through the
make sure that
books
they're
and
staying within their budget, right? And so,
sure.
um, ultimately, I think the buck stops with Schneer though. So Rob Kligman will bring over ideas to Schneer, and Schneer is the one that's got to sign off on it, right?
Okay.
So, he's just a guy that's kind of bringing it. He's a guy that came over from WWE, right? He was
Yeah.
one of their guys, a corporate stooge over there, and he's just kind of brought some of that stuff over to TNA. So is he in charge of the talent cuts? I couldn't tell you. I think he was also like trying to get sponsorships and stuff, and I haven't really seen the fruit of that. So like
No,
the
we haven't heard.
sponsorships are usually like so Anthem owns a movie studio called Gravitas Ventures, which
Okay.
is like C-level independent movies. So when you see like this is sponsored by this movie, it's just sponsored by a movie owned by
Oh,
their parent company.
it's corporate synergy, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. All right. All right. So it's not that big a deal. Okay.
Right.
So yeah, there was a lot of stuff happening on the business level. Like we mentioned, there were a lot of talent cuts, and a lot of talent cuts, which I thought was strange at the same time, because well, not a lot, but a few people who had resigned just in December got cut. Got cut in 2024, right? Like I think Trent Seven was one of those, right? That he got.
Well,
Or am
yeah.
I missing something here?
No, you're not. He signed a deal in December of 2023.
Right.
It was a 1 year deal. It expired in December of
Oh, it was just a
2020.
1 year deal. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
TNA signs a lot of like short term deals. So a lot of these folks, their deals were just coming due, and they just couldn't agree on a number to stay.
Okay.
And that so
And
here's
keeping
the
the
thing.
expenses down and whatnot.
Well, it's not really that they're allocating the resources elsewhere, right? So they one of the knocks on Diamore is that he was, kind of had like a buddy system. So like, he brought in Kushida, he trained Kushida.
Mm-hmm.
Kushida was making, he was making pretty decent money there, and he wasn't around a whole lot, and he wasn't at every taping, but he was still being paid. And they wanted him to either come down off that number or take less dates. And he's got a dual contract in New Japan, so he's like, I'll just work New Japan and take shots with MLW. So that's what he's doing. Same with Trent Seven. He didn't have a dual contract, but they were like, you know, he was got kind of a sweetheart of a deal from D'Amore, and he missed a lot of time for
Mm-hmm. You
whatever
did.
reason. He missed a lot of time, and they were able to do just fine without him. And so when that happens, they're like, we don't really need to pay you this much, and so we can allocate this money elsewhere to somebody that's going to give us more return on our investment. And that's kind of what they were doing.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned it at the top, that Josh Alexander, the machine guns, the Motor City Machine Guns, they were both destined to leave at some point. Pretty big, significant figures also in TNA. How do you feel about that as as a fan, as a watcher of TNA? Like these two, I don't want to call them pillars, but significant chunks of what made the product really interesting just gone.
So when the machine guns left, I think I made the comment as like part of TNA's identity left with it, right?
Right.
Because they're part of the culture of TNA. Now Alex Shelley had been kind of in and out, right? And so, but he had been on another short term deal, and when Scott D'Amore left, so did they. They left. Their contracts expired like a month later, and they were just gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look, they got a good deal with WWE, and I don't think the TNA would have been able to compete with the
Yeah.
offer. I think they even got offers with AEW. So at that moment, if TNA can't keep you, and you have offers with AEW or WWE, they're just not in a position to compete, right? I think Joe Lanza was on his podcast saying tonight, like, AEW has $185 million a year TV deal. TNA has a $0 a year TV deal, so they're not really going to be competitive when it comes to
Sure.
like signing talent and stuff like that. So yeah, no, that stunk. But they left in March. TNA got hot in June. So it just goes to show you it doesn't really matter. It just matters if you can get somebody that's on your roster hot at the right time, right?
Sure.
Like all things have to kind of come together at the right time. Josh Alexander, his contract's due next month in February. I heard, so I was like kind of holding out some hope that he was going to stick around a little bit. I was like, he wants to test the free agent market is what he's saying. And I thought like, yeah, you should, but I just didn't think that the market would be there the way that he thought it would be. I'm a big fan of his. He's one of my favorite TNA guys of all time, but I just didn't really see like WWE making a play for him. He's got a real bad neck. He's beat
Agreed.
up. He's almost 40.
Yeah.
Right. So I thought he had a lot of checks against him. But I just heard a couple days ago, he's out. He's done. So
He's okay.
he's finishing up soon. And where he goes, I don't know. My guess would be WWE though.
Oh yeah, you think so? You think they you think they were able to secure him? Okay. And I guess like you said, then they'll probably be fine moving forward. Like I think once you pass the initial shock of someone who's so, you talked about the culture, who's such a part of the backbone of the company. Once they've passed that threshold and you're able to move forward, and then you see other people coming in to take those spots because nature abhors a void. Well, there's going to be people who are going to move up, and you make those people hot, just like you mentioned.
Right. It's just the reality of business, any business. I'm going through it right now. I submitted my retirement paperwork, and there
He's
was a debate
retiring.
whether or not, yeah,
He's
there was a,
he's like 25 years old and he's
yeah,
retiring.
yeah, I'm gonna retire at age 42. I'll be retired.
There you go.
From one job, I have to go get another one. But
Oh,
yeah,
oh, so
yeah,
that means changing jobs. You're not really
yeah.
retiring. That's like,
Well, yeah, but I'm gonna be drawing a pension, so technically, I'm getting a retirement check from the U.S. government the rest of my life. So,
all right,
uh,
good for
so
you. Honestly,
thank thank
good for
you.
you.
So, but there was it had to go through a review, and like, can we afford for this guy to retire right now? And
Sure.
it came back a resounding yes. Actually, we need to get him out of there because we can send a cheaper option in his place. The numbers actually add up. It's more beneficial to the Air Force that Sergeant Gilbert retire. And I saw that, and it hurt my feelings.
Yeah, it's
But I was
gotta
like,
hurt your feelings at
yeah,
first. Yeah,
yeah. But then I was like, this is what I wanted, right? So like that happens in pro wrestling too. When one person leaves, it's like a next man up mentality. There might be a little bit of a dip, but eventually you're like, not nobody's irreplaceable, right? John Cena left WWE, Roman Reigns is right there, right?
sure.
Roman Reigns working part-time, Cody Rhodes is right there. And then it goes on before them, right? Like, Steve Austin and The Rock leave and they immediately have John Cena, right? And then before
Mhm.
that, Hogan leaves, Bret Hart takes his place, Bret Hart leaves, Steve Austin takes his place. That's just the way that it goes. It's the cycle of pro wrestling. Josh Alexander's been the man here for a while. And honestly, he has not even come close to the popularity of Joe Hendry and the Hardy Boys. Not even close. His
Sure.
star
I
ratings
agree.
have surpassed theirs, but his popularity and his money drawing is just not. He's just not. That's just the nature of the beast. But I say that knowing that I liked having him in this company because I always knew if he was on top of the company, he was in the main event, you're very likely to get an excellent match,
Yep.
regardless of who he's wrestling. I saw this brother pull of like I give if Dave actually watched the match with Bully Ray, he might have actually given that one 4 stars. To pull 4 out of Bully freaking Ray is pretty goddamn impressive. So I think Josh Alexander is a tremendous pro wrestler, and I hope he does well in WWE.
I think he will. I think he'll be fine. So, yeah, so on top of all of that, of all the departures and whatnot, we also had something pretty significant happen. The budding partnership with
Yeah.
WWE NXT started having some talent exchange. Starting, Jordan Grace showing up on episodes of NXT with the Knockouts title, which was not an insignificant event, which burgeoned into a talent exchange overall. And I think there's a lot to talk about and there's a lot to unpack, especially after the news that broke today that essentially that WWE and NXT are WWE and TNA, I should say, excuse me, are officializing their relationship. It's not just like a handshake deal or whatever it was last year. Now it's like, no, we're actually moving forward with this. We're making news out of it. It's a real thing. So let's revisit this from the start. You see Jordan Grace showing up on NXT. Do you start getting the heebie-jeebies, Mike? Are you like, oh my God, what's going to happen to TNA moving forward? Like, tell me what's on your mind at that point.
So Jordan Grace actually showed up at the Royal Rumble last year.
At the Royal Rumble, you're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
But
she's in the Royal Rumble, and I watched that, and I saw this woman go in there, and she looked like a megastar.
she really
She
did.
got in there with those other women in the WWE, and she was as good or better than all of them. And I was like, she is gone. And you look at that and you're like, okay, that's bad for TNA, but you know who it's good for? It's good for Jordan Grace, who has been busting her ass for a long time, and she completely transformed her body. She looks tremendous, right?
Mhm.
She's got fast muscle twitch fibers, right? She's just an explosive athlete,
Yep.
and she can go in there and with any of them, and it's just like you put it like I saw her with Bianca Belair, and I thought Bianca Belair is probably a better athlete, but I thought that Jordan Grace's the way she operated in the ring was actually more crisp, and it was probably couple levels above even Bianca. And I think Bianca's tremendous, right?
Oh, I love
Um,
Bianca. And,
yeah,
but like to me, like her showing up in the Rumble, I had pretty much the same things, the
yeah,
same ideas as you. It wasn't necessary. Like it was kind of like a Mickey James thing. It's like, oh, isn't this nice for her kind of thing? And I'm like, okay, well, this is her tryout. She looks tremendous. I too was like, she's probably hitting the bricks. But then, like shortly thereafter, she
yeah.
shows up on NXT and that's
And
where that's where it became a little more shocking, I guess.
right. Well, and then I think at that point we started turning that hourglass over, right?
Yeah,
And the sand
yeah,
was starting.
yeah, yeah.
Now we're counting down the days, right?
If you hadn't before, you started there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, okay, there's something to this. She's now on NXT. They want her, right? And so they're not just bringing her in for no reason, and they're not just bringing anybody from TNA. They brought her specifically because of how impressive she was at the Royal Rumble. Excuse me. So I just assumed that that like the clock was ticking on her, and sure enough, that ended up being the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think of WWE entering into like some type of talent exchange or partnership with any company, your head automatically goes to All Star Wrestling in the 80s when they started having the territory send them the tapes of all the different people. And then all of a sudden, Vince is signing all of those people, right? So that's where your head
Mm-hmm.
goes. Your
Yep.
head goes to, talent exchanges, NXT UK, Evolve, the times that they worked with Memphis, the times that they worked with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. All of the companies that they've ever worked with are no longer there. So,
That's
right,
pretty
like
much it.
that's been it. Like there's very few companies are still alive after having an agreement with WWE. The only way they would still be alive is if they were on really solid footing that WWE couldn't even like get rid of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's immediately where like Mike, conspiracy Mike starts to take over in that sense. So you see Jordan Grace on there. It's like, okay, they're taking Jordan, and you know what? They should take Jordan because Jordan deserves a big payday, right? She's a great worker.
Sure.
Um, but then all of a sudden, the Rascals show up, and you're like, huh? It's like, do they want to take the Rascals now? And then, Joe Hendry shows up. Fucking Hammerstone showed up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then next thing you know, like they're sending over a lot of their NXT talent and some of the lower level stars that just need reps, right? Which I thought was
Sure.
like, I think that's a good idea for NXT to send their younger, their greener talent. Like they should send them around the world, and they have been. They sent them to Noah. I think
Yeah.
they should send them to Mexico. I think they should send them everywhere to get them exposure and to get them working in front of different types of crowds. I think that's a good idea.
Absolutely. And working other styles, working other people, then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm 100% with you.
Yeah. So, the thing that I worried initially with this WWE and TNA partnership, um, which is what kind of what happened with the AEW. You want it to be a symbiotic relationship and not a parasitic relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the relationships that WWE has had in the past have been parasitic, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
to include ECW, right? So
Um,
they'll send some people over there, but their people got to go over all that stuff to this day, that has not been the case with this NXT and TNA relationship. So I can only go off of what I have seen right now. It has not been a parasitic relationship. Now you're probably going to say, Mike, well, NXT got all the biggest stars from TNA, and TNA only got the lower level stars.
did you read my mind? Do you have powers? Do you have?
Yeah, happen to be good at this. No, so here's why that was a good thing for TNA. What happened to TNA when they brought over big stars from AEW?
The ratings went up.
For one episode, yes, they did. Yeah,
Yes.
so Kenny Omega beat the second. So Kenny Omega had the number one rated episode for 1 week,
Right.
221,000. The second highest rated was from the year before with you're never gonna guess who was leading the company at the time. Tessa Blanchard, actually.
Right.
Well, is like the most consistently big draw at TNA on Access, right? So Kenny Omega had one number that beat hers, and then the rest of his were much lower, right? So he had the one, and then he had two pay-per-views that actually did pretty good.
That did good. Mm-hmm.
Just this last year, TNA had three pay-per-views that beat it, right? So, but aside from like popping a couple of numbers, Kenny came in and just beat everybody, and nobody got over, right? Christian Cage lost to Josh Alexander. Christian Cage isn't the same as Kenny Omega.
Kenny Omega. No, I agree.
So, and then of course Tony Khan came over and was brutally lambasting Impact on their own show, and Impact couldn't respond to it, so they couldn't say anything. So that's when Scott D'Amore lost me completely. Is whenever he allowed that to happen on his television show, and he just had to sit there and eat shit, and they never got a payoff. They weren't allowed to respond. So what does that tell you? It's like AEW fans never wanted that relationship to happen with TNA, right?
Right.
AEW fans saw TNA as lesser than. Tony Khan came on to TNA television telling his fans that it's lesser than, you shouldn't pay attention to it, that it sucks. right? And so they didn't come over. They popped a couple of numbers, but they didn't really come over. They didn't stick around. So when Kenny Omega left, Christian Cage left, their relationship died. TNA was back in the dumps again. A lot of that's on TNA for allowing a lot of that shit to happen. They didn't stand up for themselves, and the content wasn't good enough to hold an audience, right?
Sure.
So with this right now, Joe Hendry and Jordan Grace and the Rascals have gone over to NXT and they're getting put over. They're winning matches. They're being built up to title matches, and yes, they won, but they got made to look like big stars even in a losing effort in those title matches. With Ethan Page, yes, on paper got the victory over Joe Hendry, but he cheated, right? Roxanne beat Jordan Grace, but she cheated, right? Um, Zachary Wentz took the X Division title over to I think it was Halloween Havoc pay per view
I
and
think, yeah.
defeated Wes Lee as the X Division champion. And then a couple days later on TV, then he ended up losing. Right, so their stars were getting put over on NXT television, and then they're coming back to TNA as bigger stars, and then that's when some of the magic happens. And one other thing that led to the momentum for TNA was right before all this, in April, Joe Hendry starts to get over just
Hmm.
naturally because he was singing songs in the middle of the ring to AJ Francis. The video went viral. All of a sudden, he releases his theme song as a single, and it just starts blowing up on the charts everywhere. So now there's like this groundswell of support for Joe Hendry. He wasn't scheduled to go to NXT. He wasn't a part of the original thing. They wanted Jordan and the Rascals. They didn't know nothing about Joe Hendry, but Joe Hendry got himself way over, and now he's coming over to NXT, and now he's even more over than he was before. And so that whole thing just like coming together right at the perfect time was this perfect storm of TNA to have the best year that they've had under the leadership of Anthem, and not even close to any other years prior to that.
Do you kind of think though that this is like that? Okay, with especially now that they formalized the
Yeah.
relationship. Do you think that this is just like a WWE setting itself up another talent pipeline? Because I could use stronger language. I could talk about poaching, right?
Yeah.
Where you're
Yeah.
taking Jordan, where you're taking Joe Hendry away, right? And if you're
Yeah.
doing it with Josh Alexander on top of that, like it's like, holy
Yeah.
shit, So you
It-
so yes, you like I see the pattern. Frankly, I never actually thought about it this way, where the stars from TNA go to NXT, get themselves over, win some matches, come back. Their aura has raised a bit, but they're all going back. Like they're all
yeah.
because
Eventually, yeah.
they're all gonna go back to WWE and just sign a contract there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it
So, I think the biggest stars will. But here's my counter to that. That was gonna happen anyway. Right? Like if you get yourself over and you're in a small company, the bigger companies are going to want you, and the smaller company has no shot to keep you. Right?
this is
And
true.
this happens. This is going to happen whether or not they're partners with WWE or not. Same thing with New Japan. Who has been the worst thing for New Japan's business other than COVID? It's been AEW, right? If you take a look at the top 10 stars from 2019 to this day, for New Japan, how many of those signed contracts with AEW recently? They're all in AEW and they're partners. It just happens. Like they're gonna get over there. They're gonna get to the big company. They're gonna see that catering. They're gonna see those big crowds, those bright lights, those big paychecks all those people are getting, and they're gonna want those. Could Okada left New Japan because he wanted those things, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
After, you know
Hmm.
what I mean? Jay White was, part of Forbidden Door a few years ago, and he loved it, right? And so, like the following year, when his contract expires, he goes. Same with Will Ospreay. So with this, if you're TNA, you already know now, like you know your role, right? You know your position, you know your lot in life. The same thing happened to them whenever they were partnered up with AEW too, right? Like as soon as Deanna Prazo's contract came up, she's heading over and doesn't get on TV, but she works over there now, right? W. Morrissey did a really good job for TNA. Went over, had a tryout match in AEW when they were still partners. He wrestled Wardlow, and then like 2 weeks later, he signed a contract, right?
Sure.
Like that just happens when a small company is working with a bigger company. The bigger company, as soon as your contract comes due, and the bigger company's impressed by you, they're going to take you. Now, this just is like, okay, we all know what this is now, right? And we're not, fronting about it essentially.
Right. So, and But does it seem more like it's like a straight talent pipeline, or do you think like there's really a desire to work together as business partners? If I'm
You
making
want to you want
sense here.
to so last year I actually wore a tinfoil hat on my show and I put it on
Yes.
my head and I
Yes.
had I had a whole conspiracy. And fucking JD laughed at me. He's like, "I don't think that's true, Mike." But
Yeah,
I
but
think
I
Warren, I think you're gonna be into this conspiracy.
yeah, I was gonna say and you know we should have a talk about JD. You know, sometimes man, he's a little hard on you to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Yeah, he'll be a little tough on the old master sergeant, right?
right. I
So,
know.
so I put this fucking hat on, right? And I tell him, I'm like, JD, this is like at the beginning of the relationship. It's like I think WWE is propping up TNA to take some of the market share away from AEW, and they're even sending out some of their journalists. Right, I use that term loosely. Some of these dickheads on Twitter, like Justin Labar and Dave LaGreca and Raj Giri, douchebag. It's like some of these other cats to go out there and start this conversation that TNA is starting to overtake AEW, right?
A true national second promotion.
A
Yes.
true national second promotion. I think they're propping up TNA to take away from AEW.
Sure.
Um, and TNA's ticket sales are through the roof, comparatively speaking to what they were before. Pay-per-view numbers are up. Okay, ratings, no, but nobody's got that fucking channel. Nobody's watching Access. Like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I had the channel when I first got here to Hawaii because it was just available on our local cable system. So it wasn't when I was in Southern California, but it is here, right?
Right.
So I get it. I have to pay like $40 more to get that added to my cable package. It's good. It's an entertainment plus, right? So it's like
Oh,
40 more bucks. And then when I'm watching it, so I remember I watched Impact one night on Thursday night. I'm like just flipping through the channels on a Friday night. I was like, oh, let's see what's on Access. A rerun of the fucking Monkeys, Warren. Like in 2023, they were having reruns of the Monkeys Friday night prime time, right? Nobody's watching that goddamn channel. So I don't really talk about the TNA ratings, but anyway, so I had this whole thing. So I think that like absolutely legitimately is a part of it. I think they're propping up another company to actively hurt AEW. AEW is their enemy. TNA, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. TNA is no threat to WWE, right? They're
no,
not at
it's not.
all. I think they would rather have them in the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. So they're propping them up a little bit. I think I absolutely think that WWE helped TNA get that deal with Canada and on
Sure.
Sportsnet 360. I think that's legit.
I agree.
WWE was on there for a decade, and I think WWE probably let that channel know, like, hey, look, if you go with TNA, the price is going to be much cheaper, and we're sending our talent over there, right? Just to block AEW because don't let them front. Tony Khan wanted that deal. TNA got it, right? And I think WWE actively helped them. I think that big Sony 10 deal in India is coming up. I think WWE is going to help TNA get that deal.
Interesting.
And if they do get that deal, that's a big money deal. That's going to completely change the landscape of TNA's business, right? So I think that they're going to help them dig into AEW's potential market share, right? But I also think the relationship with NXT and TNA has been mutually beneficial. The NXT fans like TNA, TNA fans like NXT, like they all like the thing. So, like both sides are really happy. NXT gets to send their talent over that's super green, and they get more reps, and that's been really beneficial. You don't think that sending Javon Evans over to work Eddie Edwards would not be very beneficial to Javon Evans? I think it would. Eddie Edwards is great, right?
Mm-hmm.
WWE's not going to get anything out of Eddie Edwards going to their channel. He's like 40. He's never really been a big star, but he's just like a pretty really good wrestler, right? And so I think that does help them, and then it really did create a little bit of buzz for NXT. So I thought that they did get some benefit out of it. I think more of the benefit leans towards TNA overall. But will it be a complete talent pipeline? I not a complete, like I don't think it's going to be a proving ground for WWE. Um, but I do think that anybody that gets over is probably on their way to WWE once their
Sure.
contracts are expired. In fact, Jordan Grace, like she's going there this month. Her contract was actually expiring come up this summer. They worked out a deal to let
Yeah,
her
they
out
worked.
early.
Yeah. They got it. She got her out early. Yeah. See, I struggle with the concept of because everything you made sense, and you know what? I love your conspiracy theory. I think it makes a lot of sense that they're basically running blocks with
Yeah.
with TNA.
They're using TNA as a pawn in their proxy war with AEW.
And that I can get behind. What I have trouble getting behind is or at least that I struggle with. How about that? Is the idea that it's been that the partnership has been beneficial for TNA. Like I have trouble seeing what TNA is getting out of it. I honestly do, because like you said, you don't watch, you don't talk about the ratings because nothing ever moves, because no one has the channel. So, WWE fans aren't going in droves to watch the product. And I am of the belief that WWE fans watch WWE, and I don't care who moves around. They are not attached to wrestlers. And the proof of this is Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné. You remember when she left, everyone was like, droves of fans are going to follow in. They're going to follow to AEW, right? Not exactly what was expected, prognosticated. That didn't turn out that way, because
Warren, let's just call it like it is. I know I don't want to get you heat with the Monet heads out there. She's been a fucking flop. Let's be honest. At the box office, she's a flop.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. So but the idea nonetheless is that she was supposed to bring all these fans, but no one followed. And au contraire, WWE in the meantime keeps getting more and more fans. And the WWE fans then discarded her. They called her a traitor. So there's to me now, like, it seems pretty obvious, there are WWE fans as opposed to fans of particular wrestlers in WWE. Because if those wrestlers hit the bricks, if they leave, they become traitors, they get branded, no one really follows. So
I completely agree, and I got a good counter to that.
Okay.
So WWE told their audience that it's okay to go to TNA. That it's okay if TNA comes to your town, you can buy a ticket to go to TNA.
But when did they say this? Because
as soon as they brought TNA into the tent, right? As soon as they brought the TNA champions onto their show, as soon as they did all of that, they said it's okay to like TNA. And I'm telling you, dude, like show after show, the buildings are much more full, the crowds are bigger, and a lot of them are just WWE casuals. Like TNA's in town, they see Joe Hendry on the billboard, and then I'll be honest, the Hardy Boys are like, and I give this analogy to Joe Lanza. The Hardy Boys are like the Rock and Roll Express and Smoky Mountain. They're really hot right now for TNA. They're bringing a lot of people. So since June, the houses have just gone up and up and up. Just a string of nonstop sellouts, and a lot of them are just like your WWE casuals showing up. Like they don't really know what's going on in TNA. They're just like, they're coming to the town and they're watching the shows. Pay-per-view numbers are up. They say app subscriptions are up, but you don't get access to that data. So I have a hard time like using that. But they will say that the TNA Plus app subscriptions numbers this year are the biggest that they've ever been. And I'm sure that is the truth, because they've isolated it and they've promoted it pretty heavily. Endeavor, which is the parent company of TKO, which is the parent company of WWE, actually owns the app. All right. So they're owning and operate the TNA Plus app. They say that it's much bigger than it's ever been before. I don't doubt that. I just don't know how big that really is. Like, I was like, okay, did you go from 10,000 to 15,000? Like, I don't know. Right. But they say that those subscriptions are up. So, well, we don't see it reflecting in the ratings because just nobody has the channel. The other metrics are through the roof. Right.
Right.
And so that's the data that I can point to. WWE has conditioned their audience to support WWE. Right.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you to support TNA. They supported TNA. Just 2 nights ago, Masha Slamovich was on there, and I can't remember the dipshit, like the announcer. I don't know his name. Vic something said, "Oh, there's Masha Slamovich. She's gonna be defending her title this Sunday at TNA Genesis." He just told his audience that it's okay to go see TNA Genesis. And then today with the press release, Paul Levesque and Shawn Michaels, everybody saying TNA is part of the family. TNA had already sold plenty of tickets. Like they're doing over 2,000 tickets for Genesis this Sunday. I wouldn't shock me that they blow past 3,000, and that's huge for them, right? That's absolutely huge for them. So all the other metrics besides ratings tell me that this partnership has worked out pretty well for TNA.
Well, since we're talking about those metrics, last year, even in and about itself, they filled out the Verdun Auditorium just over here in Montreal. They packed it up, 4,000 people in there, and then it was announced at the end of 2024 that they're going to be running the Galen Center in Los Angeles, 10,000 seat arena, and even more ballsy in July, if I'm not mistaken, they're doing the UBS arena in Long Island, which caused quite an enormous amount of chuckles. But how do you, okay, so off of what you're saying here, I'm assuming you're feeling confident that they're going to draw really, really well for those buildings then?
For TNA's level, yeah. But are they going to pack them out 10,000? No, that's not happening. No, like
now, okay.
In fact, for the UBS arena, they set it up for 4, right? Which that's a really good number for TNA.
They're setting up the UBS arena for 4?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's just say that let's say they call Chef Michaels and they say, hey, who'd you got available that could come pop some numbers for us that maybe generate a little interest? What if WWE is feeling extra generous and CM Punk isn't doing anything that weekend? Do you think that this new partnership that TNA could benefit from some bigger representation on it with some special appearances? Not necessarily talking about matches. I'm just talking, CM Punk will appear, or whatever the hell,
So with the press release, while WWE was mentioned a lot, it seemed like they were focusing it on NXT.
True.
TNA. I think that if they do send talent from the main roster over, it might be people with TNA roots. And so I think when TNA booked these buildings, they knew they had this ace up their sleeve. And so they booked it in mind with that they would be able to bring somebody over that could draw and help them draw the house. And the name that comes to mind that everybody wants to see come over, who hasn't been on WWE TV in a while, is AJ Styles. And so would CM Punk? I don't think so. I don't think that would happen,
I'm just throwing CM Punk there as an example, especially since they sent him to NXT, to do the opening shows. I'm just like, it could be anyone, and AJ Styles makes a lot more sense.
I think we could probably get the occasional WWE main roster star on some of these shows, knowing that the focus is going to be NXT crossover, but with the occasional sprinkled in, like they used to do back in the territory days before Vince took over. Like they would send Andre to Mid-South, like they could probably like they already sent AJ Styles to Noah, right? They sent Nakamura to Noah. That was before they had like a formalized partnership. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't send AJ. In fact, he was just backstage at their latest show. So I kind of half expect AJ to show up at some point.
All right, that's fair. So we'll see how that's going to go. I have a theory too, and I in regards to all of this, maybe not as conspiratorial, but it's definitely.
Let's get weird, Warren. Let's go off the rails, bro. Let's do it.
Listen, this is what I've been thinking, and I've been bouncing this idea around in my brain a little bit. What if with the leaning out of the company, right? Because like we said, there were a lot of people who were released, right? Some big numbers, like we were talking about earlier, that were not renewed because we were freeing up some money. The changes in production and whatnot, and I'm looking at the partnership and whatnot, and I'm like, because it's WWE, right? So I'm always trying to think of, well, what's their angle in here? What did they get out of this? Do you think that it might be possible that because at the same time, okay, here's the thing. I'm trying to say too many things at once. I right now am under the guise that wrestling in 2025, big time pro wrestling in 2025, the first audience that promotions want to capture are the media partners, right?
Yeah.
Before the crowds, they want to they want to cater to the big spenders who can give them media deals, right? WWE would not have. We saw it with the first Raw on Netflix. They've got the executives around and they're doing the big spectacular presentation with the the projection on the screens in the middle of the ring on the four sides and the big laser pyro show that is WWE, so that when the executives look at this, they're like, wow, we're spending this is the money that's being spent on this grand spectacle. because they don't give a shit about pro wrestling. The executives don't care. Like they don't know the difference between a wrist lock and an ankle lock, brother. You know, it's like they're not going to sit down and argue with us regarding, you know, the merits of the merits of strong style as opposed to, you know, whatever the fuck. So the considering that you're always sort of angling to get the big media deal so that you want to please your media partners, what if TNA is kind of in that mode as well, where they're leaning out? They've announced that they're going to start doing live broadcasts, right? They're going to do live TNA.
They got one this coming Thursday in San Antonio, and then on February 20th from Orlando.
So in this circumstance, along with, you know, booking out the UBS Arena and the Galen Center, which which turned out to not be a coincidence, I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence that they're trying to show WWE that they can run live shows. You know what I mean? So ultimately, all this leading to, do you think they might be prepping for a sale? Because I understand also the relationship that I understand why Anthem enjoys having TNA, right? Because it's their own little content factory that they can use to create original programming for their network. So there's a lot of synergy in that. It works out well, right? But at the same time, Anthem at some point has to be like, when is this thing going to start making money? And maybe they're just ready to divest themselves of TNA, maybe even selling TNA to WWE while saying, well, doing the sale, but you guys have to provide 2 hours of content on our network, kind of thing. I don't know. I'm just like, we're talking about getting weird. Let's get weird, you know?
Okay.
Do you think that that's something that might be in the cards?
No. Scott D'Amore offered to buy the thing last year, and they said no.
No, but it's but it's okay. Hang on a second. Yeah. It's Scott D'Amore versus WWE, right? Like
but if you look at it from the WWE perspective, what are they buying?
No,
you know what I mean. Like they bought up those old territories for the tape library. What are they doing with it now?
Well,
not a goddamn thing.
They're sitting on it, and no one else is doing anything with it, which is also part of the plan, right?
So why would they be interested? Now I'm not like I think that if somebody wanted to buy TNA, they would listen to offers. I don't think that it's for sale, but neither is my pickup truck. But Warren, if you want it, I'll listen if you want to buy it, right? It's like one of those situations. So they're not leaning out the company. They're actually spending more money.
Okay.
They're spending more money on these bigger arenas, right? If they were leaning out the company, they would be working cheaper venues or they would work a studio, right? So and they're trimming the fat with Rhino, and I didn't mean to call Rhino fat, although brother Lil Husky, Trent Seven also Lil Husky. Kushida's still in really good shape. So they're trimming the fat with those guys. They're allocating those resources elsewhere. They've upgraded their production. They actually just outsourced and hired a new merchandise crew to redo all of their merch. You can actually they have so many more options than they ever had before. They're spending big money on the Galen Center and the UBS. Those aren't cheap, right? And honestly, going live is really expensive.
Yeah.
Right? It's super expensive. They've never done it before because they're on access and they're not going to make their money back. I think what they're doing with the production upgrades, the bigger venues, the bigger arenas, and going live, I think they're trying to position themselves to get a distribution deal in the United States. And I think that this partnership with WWE, if WWE saying, giving the green light to the network saying, hey, yeah, look, we're gonna work with these guys if you wanted to bring them on, kind of like I said with the international deals, I think that's what they're positioning themselves to do. Never before were they willing to move off of Fight Network in Canada, but they took a deal with Sportsnet 360, right? Which I don't know shit about fuck when it comes to Canadian sports TV, but I'm told that is the number one sports station in Canada. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. Well, it's Sportsnet 360 as opposed to Sportsnet proper. It's like ESP. It's like the ESPN2 to ESPN kind of thing.
Got you. So I think they think that this is their year to where they're become a major player in the industry, and I think that they think that this maneuver is a major player in the industry makes them become a major player in the industry. Now, is WWE using them as pawns to strip them down to all their talent, get them dependent on them, and this and that? I think that company has a history of being parasites and picking the bones clean of every partner that they've ever had. I think that remains a real possibility. To your
I think
point,
you've got to be wary at the very least.
I think everybody within TNA should be like cautiously optimistic. But are they positioning themselves to sell to WWE? I don't think WWE would want to buy it. Like what are they buying? Now would TKO want to add another company to their portfolio? Again, I don't, unless they got a big money TV deal, I don't see why they would. So I would be skeptical on WWE buying the company, but are they positioning themselves to get a media rights deal? I think
Mm.
so. If they got a media rights deal, would somebody want to buy them at that point? And could what's the parent company of TKO again? I just lost my
Endeavor.
brain. Endeavor. Would Endeavor
Endeavor.
then want to purchase them? I maybe, right? And what would Anthem want to sell them? Well, if they move off of Access and they've moved off of Fight Network, then what do they really have? So,
Yeah,
like, what do they need? What do they need the
you're not
company
wrong.
for? Like,
Yeah, you're
I
not
I,
wrong.
I think so. What Anthem when they bought the company, they said they like to buy distressed assets, which TNA at the time was in distress. They bought them out of bankruptcy court and then rebuild them, and then they a lot of times like to sell these companies after they rebuild them. So I
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be a possibility. But WWE, if you're TKO, it's like, what are you buying? Like we got WWE, we got UFC, we have PBR or the Bull Riders Association. Do we need a third rate wrestling promotion? I don't think so. I just don't see the reason. And what are they going to do? Like add it to their Netflix library? Like shut it down? I don't see a reason. Whoever's buying this thing, they either see the money earning potential from a potential US TV deal, or in the case of Tony Khan, he bought Ring of Honor as kind of like, I just really like Ring of Honor and I just want to own it, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
would be the only real reason. And I think that's why Scott D'Amore wanted to buy it, is because he loved it and he wanted to own it, and they turned him down. But if they were going to sell, they would have sold last year, I think.
Okay. I can buy that. I like the idea of getting all shiny for a distribution deal. And listen, you're making me think. You're making me think a lot about the pull that WWE has in media circles now.
Yeah. Like
To
I think what did Lanza say on his show? He said Nick Khan is a shark in a world of circus clowns.
yeah.
If TNA has Nick Khan like backing them, like if Nick Khan just sends one email to like a company, I'm not talking like you any network, like say I was tossing out FS1, just tossing it out there. I don't think they probably aren't going there, but just say FS1. If they wanted them, and like Nick Khan shot an email over, it's like, hey, look, go ahead, and the price is right. And I think for TNA, their budget is so low compared to all of the other companies. Like you could probably get like their A product for D level money. Like so I think at one point AEW is trying to sell Shockwave, right? And it seems like that has fallen through. They were going to sell like their newest
The
version
new
of
show,
Rampage,
yeah.
so like a C-level show to Fox, right? And they're probably, let's just say they wanted to get 30 million. They just spitballing. If that's their C show, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
would probably average 250,000 people per week, which I think would be pretty good for a C show. If it were in prime time, you could probably get TNA's A show for what, 5 to 10 million, and instead of doing 250,000, you could probably get 175,000. So where's the cost analysis there? I think it's like, and now you're going to get some WWE stars on the show too. I think you take the deal, right? Like that's the one you go with, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
If you look at it like if they're being propped up by WWE, they more networks might be willing to do business with them. And I think this partnership opens up CW, which they were in negotiations before WWE got the deal for NXT on CW.
Mm-hmm.
TNA was in negotiations. NWA ended up getting on the app at one point. They were supposed to be on the network, but dipshit Mitchell was snorting coke on TV, so they got moved to the app. So I think this kind of opens them up, because CW essentially wiped out most of their programming, and now they're essentially like a kind of a souped up like alternative sports network, right?
Right.
They got Saudi golf and NASCAR and WWE now, and inside the NFL, so they got all kinds of stuff, college football, college basketball. So I think they could. It wouldn't shock me if they added TNA to their portfolio.
Oh, there you go. Real quickly, before we wrap this up, what do you think some of some of the biggest challenge, or maybe the biggest challenge, if you want. Let's keep it singular. What do you think the biggest challenge is for TNA in 2025?
So they have two major challenges facing them right now.
Okay.
They are caught up in a proxy war between WWE and AEW, which means every time one of their talents, if they're even remotely pretty good and their contract expires, either one of those promotions is going to want to take them, right?
Sure.
So there's a talent hoarding issue going on in WWE and AEW.
Mm-hmm.
Both of the companies are pretty bad at it right now. Like, man, there's a lot of talent in AEW. They just can't even get on TV.
Yeah.
And they just had like the show that they were able to get on Rampage just got canceled. So
Yeah.
now they're like doing nothing, right? But those companies are still buying up talent. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. But the number one challenge that they face this coming up year is getting a distribution deal in the United States. If they don't get a distribution deal, all of these houses, like, it's all, kind of inflated right now. It's just going to pop and it's going to go right back down to where they were. Like, the bloom is going to be off the rose if they can't get a U.S. distribution deal. And so they're going to struggle with some of these places they're trying to run, even with WWE talent. Like NXT has, they went and tried to run some bigger buildings. They tried to run St. Louis like on a Tuesday night with Randy Orton at the top of the card in a big building, and they had to actually move down to a smaller building because they couldn't sell enough tickets. So I could think eventually this honeymoon period is going to wear off with TNA if they can't get a bigger TV deal.
Yeah. And knowing that wrestling is cyclical at the same time, I agree. This is probably a very good moment to strike because we don't know if the iron's going to be this hot again next year.
Yeah.
Even
Hendry's gone by the end of the year, right? And the Hardy Boys are on a 1-year deal. The moment WWE wants them back, they're going, right?
Sure.
And so they got a lot of those types of challenges going forward, and with those challenges lying ahead, if they can't get past them, then they're going to struggle at the box office.
Mike, this was a blast, and you actually shifted a lot of ways that I perceive the situation. That's probably because you know what you're talking about and you're smart. I think those are.
And also, I could be real full of shit too, Warren. And that's a big part of persuading people is being kind of a bullshitter. So that's a part of my charm. It's how I've been successful in life. It's like just bullshitting and persuading people.
Is that all it took? God damn, had I known, I would have never went to college. Thank you so much for joining me, Mike. Before you drop off, why don't you let the people know where they can follow you and your pal JD?
Yeah. The only social media that I really have is Twitter, X, whatever. I have stayed committed through all the chaos. I have not gone anywhere else. I was going to, but I made fun of so many people, the Trump supporters, when they left for Parler and Truth Social. I was like, you cowards, you left. And then whenever my fellow Democrats started to leave Twitter, I was like, I can't do it. So I'm still on X. And I don't want to get another app. I don't want to download anything. So I'm just on X at Mike Gilbert 311 is where you can find me there. And then you can get our podcast on the Voices of Wrestling Network. Comes out. You can listen to us live on Sunday night on the Voice of Wrestling Network YouTube, as well as the Mike and JD Show YouTube. Correct. And then, of course, if you just want the audio, comes out on the Voices of Wrestling Network feed. You can find us there. And if you don't like ads, patreon.com/the Mike and JD Show. And if you just want to hear me talk about TNA, I got a TNA specific show on the Patreon every Saturday morning called Brace for Impact. And I cover them there. And then the YouTube channel, I actually cover them throughout the week a lot of times. And then I just started doing a Raw review because it's on Netflix. And so I've reviewed the last 2 episodes of Raw. I don't know how much longer I can hang on. So you might want to spend your $5 now, because if I have to watch Raw, you guys got to pay for that shit. I'm not giving that away for free. So you got to pay for it. And I've recapped the last 2 episodes.
At this point, it's like it's donations, like for just your holding up the fort for us, watching all this stuff. I don't know why you do it, man. But I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on. You got to come back on our show sometime soon.
I'd love to, and I'll have you back as well. And maybe this time we can get JD out of his man cave to come join us. That'd be tremendous.
Yeah. That'd be
Thanks
great.
so much, Mike.
Thank you.
We're gonna start by talking about the Britt Baker rumors, right? She this all bubbled to the surface this weekend when Wade Keller hopped on his one of his podcasts. I can't remember exactly which one, but he got onto the torch and he started podcasting and started talking about stuff that he heard regarding Britt Baker's current spot in AEW. Let's read the full quotes for full context, okay? Because I did see, some aggregators do a little bit of a shit job putting forward what our boy Wade Killer here was saying. Let's get to it. We're talking about Britt here, of course, when we say she might be done with AEW. At least the feeling I'm getting from talking to people in AEW is Tony Khan might have her in the same category as other wrestlers where they just don't get phone calls and don't get called in to show up. Why can't I read sentences properly? There is a lot of frustration with her. I'm told, and I've heard this pretty consistently, she's wildly unpopular in the women's locker room. One person said no one ever wants to see her coming back. Speaking of the women's locker room. Now, that is a bold, broad statement. I could imagine somebody on social media going, quote, I am a women's wrestler in AEW and I want her back, unquote. Okay, fair enough. But I'm just telling you, somebody's perception is nobody wants her back. That's how bad it is. That's how bad it is. Somebody is willing to tell me that. There was the incident with her and MJF, and I'm told that factors into her being off television. But there are other issues with her that have come up. She has become increasingly difficult to work with in a general sense. She has always had a reputation for being difficult to work with. And that's the death knell, right? For professional wrestlers, when it starts getting leaked that you're difficult to work with. You remember when they leaked that about Bray when he was released? There was a bit of that. Oh, Bray Wyatt, difficult to work with. Remember that? It's always people who have an agenda when that starts leaking. Not saying that it's true or not. What I'm saying is that this was WWE's MO for years when it came to wrestlers that they released or who wanted to leave or who were on the way out or whatever. It's like suddenly it would start leaking to the media and to the public that they were difficult to work with. There was a specific situation recently, not counting the MJF situation, where people just threw their hands up. It wasn't like a huge deal, but it was enough to sort of be the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of just feeling like, you know what? We've got a strong women's division now compared to when she was on top, and we don't need to deal with her if she's going to be this difficult to work with. So that's where they are with her. I am told the Adam Cole situation is not stopping her. There should be no heat on Adam Cole. He has nothing to do with her not being on TV. Obviously, she had some standout moments in AEW and became a star and was seen as a centerpiece act. But even back when I was hearing about her reputation and being unpopular in certain circles and difficult to work with and being fiercely territorial of her role in the company in a way that just felt unsustainable. And from what I'm hearing, at least the attitude right now at the moment, the belief is Tony Khan is fed up enough that he's just going to focus his TV time on others. I don't know what that means in terms of her pay, her contract, and it's possible eventually things will change. At this point in asking around, you should not expect her back imminently. I didn't read a single thing here that says, this is the situation backstage. This is what's happening. It's like he's not, I don't feel like this, like he's reporting back stuff that he's being told, but he clearly doesn't have enough confirmation. Now, you can tell that he didn't speak, that he maybe spoke to a couple of people, but he's reporting stuff back from like one person in particular. And he says it himself, right? I'm not saying that he only spoke with one person, but there's stuff that he's reporting back. Like right here, right? One person said no one ever wants to see her come back, right? Which is a line that has been picked up by aggregators and people have been leaning on to that. It's like the locker room hates her. But if this is like one person who could have an agenda on Britt Baker, right? Who could absolutely have an agenda with Britt, or, you know, is just, or, you know, was just, well, I was going to say, or just was just harmed, or, you know, some nonsense happened between this person and Britt and they want to get back at her. You know, so again, with an agenda, it could absolutely just be someone who has an agenda. Not, you know, who doesn't like her and goes, no, nobody likes her. Nobody likes her, you know? So I don't know if this is like, how much stock we should be putting into this. How about that? I don't know how credible all of this is. And I'm not, you know, not trying to cast shade, but I think that a lot of people put a lot of stock in a lot of quotes here. Even despite me going, well, a lot of things that are being said here add up to stuff that I've heard. But again, like for me, it's like second, third hand. It's nonetheless people, you know, when this stuff gets discussed that I trust. I don't think they'd put it out there in, you know, in certain haunts just for the hell of it. You know, I think I think that there's there's maybe some you know, there's probably a kernel of truth in here, as the expression goes, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire, and I think I think there's enough smoke to warrant some stuff. But you know, the fact that she's being singled out here in this circumstance is clearly someone who has something they want to spread, someone who has an agenda, someone who has something that they want to settle out there in the open using journalists. I think this is what it is. Even though there's a lot of stuff that's said here that has been going around for a bit, you know, in regards to Britt's attitude backstage. And yes, she is fiercely territorial of her spot in the company, just like most pro wrestlers in top spots are. Again, this is not like, you know, this is not new to me. It's not news to me. It's not stuff where I'm like, oh my God, really? So yes, this is like time immemorial. This is what happens. And she probably rubbed some people the wrong way, you know, trying to stick up for her spot. I don't know in which way. Like maybe she was just completely careless. Maybe she just didn't realize what she was doing. Maybe, like I said, maybe it's all, or it's either carelessness, didn't realize what she was doing, or it's all very methodical and well thought out. That also could be the thing. Maybe she ended up getting, maybe she ended up pissing off the wrong people, right? Maybe she ended up pissing off too many people, right? These are two extremely likely scenarios where she's like, well, turns out most of the locker room doesn't like her. You know, there's been rumors going around that Jamie Hayter doesn't want to work with her anymore, despite them being an act, a very successful act for a while. You know, there's a lot of stuff. Just there's a lot of stuff that you can potentially point to, and then, you know, maybe go, well, you know, maybe there is some truth. Maybe there is some truth to all of this, right? The other one, right, is, you know, again, and I saw, well, you know, like the good folks at Cultaholic, I should say, using this as a line, is that Tony Khan is fed up with Britt Baker, right? Because he used the word fed up. But if you see it in the context, it's really, First of all, the belief is, so we don't know. The belief from whom? Is it this one same person, or is it like, we can only hope that Wade vetted a bit of this information and called a couple of people before running with any of this, right? You can only hope. But right now, the belief is Tony Khan is fed up enough that he's just going to focus his TV time on others. And yet some people are saying Tony Khan is fed up of Britt Baker, and her contract is, he's not going to renew her contract. He's going to keep her off TV. It's going to be a Ray Phoenix situation number 2. Man, it's like, I don't know. I'm not reading that. She might be done with AEW, and that's the feeling he gets from talking to people in AEW, right? And again, the feeling, the impression, right? The feeling I'm getting from talking to people in AEW is that Tony Khan might have her in the same category as other wrestlers where they just don't get the calls, like Ricky Starks, right? Feeling. I get the impression. I kind of think that this may be the thing. Isn't it odd? And then suddenly we're deciding to run with this as fact. He doesn't, like, there's a difference between, there's a difference with it. Think about the language, let's say Sean Ross Sapp or Dave Meltzer use, or Mike Johnson, right? The language they would use like in an environment where they'd feel really confident about this. They'd say, yeah, after talking with people in AEW, it seems like Tony Khan is fed up and has put her in the same category as Ricky Starks, kind of thing. That would be the language they use. No, I get the feeling. I have the impression. Like the language is very loosey-goosey. Don't get me wrong. This is interesting gossip, right? This is interesting, like little backstage vibes that we're getting. But a lot of people are taking this way too seriously, right? And then people got upset at Tony Khan. It's like, oh, he's going to do the same thing to her as Ray Phoenix and Tony Starks. And that's not Ricky Starks. Tony Stark, he'd fly in there with his suit, with his power suit, and he'd do the blast thing and go pew, 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 pew. But so they're like, oh, it's like, what a shit thing to do, so on and so forth, right? And then I sort of scratch my head when I read these things, right? And I don't want to come across as a Tony Khan defender, but what is it going to take for people to be happy with how Tony Khan deals with difficult situations in his locker room? Because on one hand, he's too soft, but on the other hand, he's too hard. But we can't seem to get any kind of consensus. It's like most of the time, Tony's too likable. He doesn't like to ruffle feathers. He tries to avoid confrontation. He doesn't like to do bad things. And yet, he's putting his foot down with the Ray Phoenix situation, whether you agree with it or not. That's an entirely different type of conversation. But deciding that this guy that you're going to add on the injury time and you're going to have him sit at home waiting for his contract to run out, that's a hard decision you have to make. I don't know what decisions were made for Ricky Stark, so on and so forth. If this Brit situation has any water to it, but he's keeping her off TV. And that, again, cannot be an easy decision to make. So it's like Tony gets all the shit. Oh, he's too soft. He's too nice. He's not a good boss. You have to get yourself respected. Sometimes you have to make the hard decisions, and then he makes hard decisions. And then it's almost like, yeah, but not that hard. It's like, what do people want from him? I would, legitimately, I would not want to be in Tony Khan's shoe. I would not want to be in Tony Khan's shoes. The next thing, right, that we should pull up here, which is important, just to continue down this path here, was Brian Alvarez earlier today I believe he took to Twitter. Which, by the way, I will be officially deactivating my account today. just in case you're following me on Twitter, and you're behind the little locked thing, because I privated my account, even though I only go on when I want to check out links, so on and so forth. But I think I will be officially deactivating my account. So if you're following me there, I suggest you follow me on Blue Sky instead at MrWarrenHayes.show or the Mr. Warren Hayes Show Discord. Link is in the description. And I answer a lot of DMs. In Discord, a lot more than I do or used to do on Twitter at the very least. Anyway, Brian Alvarez hit the Twitter machine, and he said basically saying, things seem to be blown way out of proportion. Baker's status with the company drew headlines on Monday following reports. I love that they didn't mention the torch. It's just following reports, right? Baker's status with the company drew headlines on Monday following reports that she is quote unquote wildly unpopular, which could turn into a term we use here on stream quite a bit. Just like piss pot, right? We got to use piss pot. That's the official insult of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Wildly unpopular is also a good one. I feel like we should lean into that one a little bit too. I'm going to get through this reading here. Baker's status with the company drew headlines on Monday following reports that she is wildly unpopular in the AEW women's locker room and that Tony Khan may no longer be booking for her due to being fed up with her. Alvarez wrote to his subscribers on X. Oh, yes, getting some of them Elon pennies. From talking to multiple people within AEW, this is the quote, by the way, from Alvarez. From talking to multiple people within AEW, the Britt Baker stories all over the internet today appear to be blown way out of proportion. She's not being used, and there don't appear to be any imminent plans, but there's nothing to her being finished with the company. There you go. So, conflicting reports, button heads, going ram. Who's right? Who's wrong? This is the kind of thing that we'll only know like in years from now. We're only going to know this in years from now. A long time from now. And then, one of these, either Wade or Brian are going to be like, they're going to pat themselves on the back for it. Baker's last match was a win over Penelope Ford on the November 13, 2024 edition of AEW Dynamite. Following the bout, Serena Deeb walked out on stage and it appeared an angle was building between the two. Baker was heard saying, "Nobody cares," as the segment came to an end, and Deeb wore a t-shirt with "Nobody Cares" written on it to the ring for her match on the December 7 AEW Collision. However, neither Deeb nor Baker have wrestled in AEW since then. Well. So, there you go. Alvarez pointing out straight out, it might not be. We might be over representing here. Might be going a little far. I don't think it's actually as bad as everyone is making it out to be, which is a lot of the aggregators. A lot of this stuff, because I think if you read Wade's thoughts on the situation, let's call it the reporting, right? It's a report. Like nothing comes across as factual. Everything comes across as vibes. It's just like, is it, again, you can question whether it's a responsible thing to do or not. Because, it feels like someone has an agenda, has an axe to grind with Britt, and it feels like Wade is sort of being used in that circumstance, right? And you'd think that Wade at this point in his career would know better than to just be than to just be a pawn in some kind of little game here with a pro wrestler or some pro wrestlers that are trying to get at each other and sway fans' opinions and whatnot. So, I get it. I understand it. But I think, like, once again, like, the aggregation got a little out of control, especially by saying, Tony Khan is fed up. Well, that's not what Wade said. And I don't know if I don't know if anyone truly learned anything about Britt's attitude backstage. Because I feel it's been like something that circulates that just, oh, well, I heard she's bad news backstage. I hear she's, and it stems all the way back to the Thunder Rosa stuff, right? Like, we're talking years of this. This is like, I don't know. Maybe it's just people forgot about it. Do we want to speculate? Do we want to say, like, should she leave? Should she go? Should we, look, I'll try to be as concise in my thoughts as possible on this. I think that the women's division is no longer in great need of Britt Baker. I'm not saying that Britt is completely useless. She is not. But I think there was a time that the women's division really, that she carried it on her shoulders and that it really leaned into her. And I don't think this is necessarily the case anymore. I think that if there's I believe there is one cornerstone of that division, and that's Toni Storm. I think the torch has been clearly passed in that circumstance. And Toni truly is like I think at the very least in Tony Khan's mind, Toni is the face of the women's division. Now, is this good enough for someone like Britt, who feels like the division is hers, like it's her territory at the very least, and that she was once at the top of it? Is that good enough for her? Does she feel comfortable in a spot where she's like, well, I don't need to be in the top spots, right? I don't need to be, they can do whatever they want with me. Maybe that's not good enough for her. Maybe she wants to jockey back for her big spots, right? But I'm going to tell you, between you and me, I think there's a lot of terrain that needs to be covered with her if she ever did decide to come back and want to find her spot again. I think she'd have to cover a lot of ground, because the match that she had with Monet at All In was not very good. And with the run Monet has been on over the course of the fall, it's hard to point to point at that match and say, oh yeah, Mercedes, she's washed, and Baker, she's washed too. It's not what the run Monet is having. If Monet truly did stink now, she wouldn't have had the fall that she had, where she's just having week after week, match after match, just incredible banger, one after the other. So, I think Britt has a lot of catching up to do. I think she has a lot to she has a lot to prove. Once again, unfortunately, because the division is kind of moving forward, whether she's there or not. It's not stalled. I think it's at an all-time high as far as quality of talent, caliber of talent between Mercedes Moné and Willow and Statlander and Storm and Hayter and Yuka, of course. We can't forget that. We got to beat the allegations. It's hard to say, yeah, the division is in absolute need, right? And yeah, they just added Megan Bain, who will likely be a very good addition. And Mariah May's not, Mariah May's pretty good. Like, we're not in a dire need for Britt Baker anymore. So the question does ask, you wonder, should she stick around? Does she need to stick around? What if she does decide to exercise some options and go see if the grass is greener anywhere else? Could you blame her? I say no, because that's what wrestlers should do. You get exhausted out of a territory, you move on to the next one, and you can come back to the old territory then. And people have missed you. You're a champ. They're like, hey, the person we missed is back. There's no bad scenario in this. There's nothing bad about this. If she were to head on out. Now, of course, wrestling fans, being who they are in this day and age, would see this as, another AEWL, and, an AEW original leaving, which is fair, and that's absolutely true. But another AEWL, oh my God, another L. Instead of seeing just like this should be the natural way of things, right? This is how things should be. People should have the possibility to go work elsewhere, come back, just do this rotation. They should. So, it's fucking bizarre. But, I don't know if she'll, whatever happens when her contract is up, which apparently is still in a couple of years, right? We'll see what happens. We'll see how she is. We'll see how things smooth out. But again, if she wanted to go entertain other offers, all the more power to her. And please, let her do it. Let anyone do it. Just go do things elsewhere. If you feel you've stagnated in one spot, right? There's the possibility of doing this in 2024, 2025 now, because there are multiple places to go work at. So just, go stretch your legs. Anyway, those are my thoughts on all this situation for now. Talk about the PCO nonsense.
New stipulation in a
Let's talk about the PCO nonsense here. We're going to run the clip. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get demonetized by GCW.
new stipulation in a match. I have no.
So PCO won, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I didn't watch the show. He was in a battle royal, right? Or a scramble, right? Hikaru, you watched GCW, right? Was it a battle royal? He had just won a match, right? I can't remember what it was. But he had just won a match, a battle royal. Thank you, Hikaru. And he had finished everything off. He was in the ring and he sets up a chair. Okay. It wasn't in Fortnite. So he has the TNA, right? The TNA Digital Media Championship, which is one of TNA's most coveted titles. He gives it the old spit shine.
Real nice. I don't really understand.
And he's got a sledgehammer. Now you're saying, why does he have a sledgehammer? It's PCO. He's fucking nuts. Don't ask too many questions. I've watched this clip a couple of times because I think it's really funny. And one of the things that makes it really funny is MLJ's reactions here are really funny. All right, so he swings for the belt, but he completely whiffs it. Right?
Turn it off.
He does it again. Completely whiffs again. Now at this point, Brett is like, I'm sure he's telling Emil, get the fucking sledgehammer out of this guy's hands. He's gonna drive a hole through my ring. He can't aim properly. He's gonna drive the fucking sledgehammer through my ring.
That's enough. That's enough.
And It looks enough like a shoot to me, right? He tore the new canvas. So there you go. Because of the chair, right? The chair getting dragged around like that, right? This looks enough like a shoot, right? Because this is not what Emil is doing is not a working grab, right? It's not a working grab. And he tears the microphone out of Emil's hand. And I saw some commentary. It's like, oh, it's clearly a work because Emil gave him the mic. It's like, listen, pal, if this completely insane, huge, fearless, monstrous beast of a man swinging a sledgehammer wantonly, in front of a crowd is grabbing a microphone out of your hand, you let him take it. You let him take it. It's yours. Yes, sir. In fact, let me get you a second one.
I've sold out the biggest house in TNA history.
Which was, I believe, true right up until yesterday, right? I think, but the 4,000, he's talking about the 4,000 in the Verdun Auditorium last year for a Slammiversary, right? I can never remember TNA pay-per-view names. Ever. Bound for Glory, Hard to Kill, Slammiversary. Like they all sort of meld together. I can't. He says I sold it out, and I agree. And I think it's been discussed. It's been put out there that PCO, he ran the territory to just like go for all of the, he ran the territory, giving out tickets, handing out tickets at discount, getting in contact to get some corporate pricing, right? I think that this has been documented, right? And when I say he, I mean he and the TNA team, but he specifically, here's what he did. He went to all of the guys that he knows in the gyms everywhere, right? And he goes and he sees his boys, and he's like, come see our show. Viens voir mon show. Viens voir mon show. Ça va être un très bon show. That's what you talk about, and that's how you say it in French Canadian, Quebec. Ça va être un très bon show. Vous allez voir. Venez-vous-en. Vous allez aimer ça. La lutte. Ça va être super bon. That's what he'd say. So that's why there was a lot of an unusually large proportion of very buff men in the audience. And I had noticed, I was like, isn't this a little weird? But there was a lot of particularly buff individuals in the audience in Verdun. And I'm like, man, not everyone in Verdun is like, this is not a proper representation of the average populace of Verdun. Anyway, so they do that, and then they do like a lot of corporate deals. So, you call up a company and you say, hey, we, organize this for your for a special social activity for your office, buy 10 tickets, get them for $10 a piece, kind of thing. Like they just went nuts with all of the marketing strategies for the Verdun show. So yes, PCO, when he does say I sold it out, I agree. But it's not because he's necessarily like this draw. It's because he put a lot of fucking effort into doing this.
I sold more t-shirts in one night than any TNA.
I sold more t-shirt in one night than any other TNA, and then then GCW is like, cut the feed, because they're trying to get the ref is in there. Emil's still trying to get the microphone off of him. Nothing's working. It's just, it's like complete nonsense. I'm looking at this. I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I thought it was funny. Like I thought, of course this is funny. So basically, we all saw this clip. I think it's very funny. And I'm like, is this a work? Because again, like, I'm sort of torn when I was watching this the first time between this being a shoot, but I'm like, look at history. All right, let me lower this for a bit here. Because I was sort of like, look at Emil's behavior, right? His body language. It's like, look, he's like, like, you know, he doesn't look like, it doesn't quite feel like he's being very aggressive. But then again, how do you be aggressive with a guy the size of PCO kind of thing? You know, because you'd think someone would be struggling with him. But then he's probably thinking to himself, I don't want PCO to fucking pop me in the face, which could absolutely be a thing, right? So I'm looking at this and like, I don't know. And then I'm wondering, I'm thinking to myself, why are they airing this? Why is this going on? Why didn't they just like cut it immediately? Why is this going on? Like maybe they're setting something up. You know, there's been a lot of back and forth going on, you know. And then when he's talking shit and they cut it, I'm like, well, maybe they should have left it going. Maybe they just should have let him say his thing, you know, tell his piece. So, you know, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. So then, of course, things start to get reported. First of all, we have Sean Ross Sapp, or on the Blue Sky, saying those that Fightful Select spoke to at GCW said that he claimed, he being PCO, said that he claimed he was going to further a storyline with TNA, and he went into business for himself. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh, this is so gloriously sloppy. This is the pro wrestling I know and love. This is the shit I love. Where backstage stuff boiling up to the surface and appearing right in front of everyone in the most pro wrestling way possible. I was sitting there and I haven't seen one of these in a while. Like, this is the real thing here. The guy comes in, he has the belt, he smashes it. No one knows exactly what's going on. He told us it was for a storyline. Okay. And then he goes into business for himself. Holy shit. You got to respect this, right? On a certain level. You got to be like, man, this fucking rules. Why don't we have more of this? Just outright airing grievances and doing it in the singular most pro wrestling way you could do it. Taking a sledgehammer to the belt of the company you have a grudge against and just trying to smash it into bits. Is this the classy way to do things? Is this the best way to do things? No, probably not. But you know what? I don't care. I don't have a pony in this race. I couldn't give a shit. I don't care. This is awesome. This is actually awesome, and probably the best thing that happened this weekend. Back to the thing here. PCO then decided to hit Twitter and to explain why he smashed the TNA title, the digital media title. Who, let's be honest, I don't know who gives a shit about this either. Who gives a flying fuck about the TNA Digital Championship? I'm not even sure there are people in TNA who give a shit about it. I think the only person who ever used it well was, who made the most of it is Joe Hendry, right? Because he was doing all the social media gimmickry around it too, right? This ruled. So okay. So he's back. No, Brian, stop that. So he gets on the Twitter today. And as the article, is this Jason? No, it's Ian Carey. Okay. And he's writing, he said, PCO has been active on social media today. Oh, you don't say. PCO has been active on social media today following his controversial appearance at People vs. GCW on Sunday. Controversial. You mean awesome? You mean awesome, not controversial? Wrong choice of words, Ian. After winning the kickoff rumble at GCW's Hammerstein Ballroom show last night, PCO proceeded to smash the TNA Digital Media Championship. Well, he tried his best anyway. The intent was there. And briefly cut a promo mentioning he's drawn the biggest house, Slammiversary 2024 in Montreal, and sold the most merchandise of anyone in TNA. However, the live feed quickly cut away to a video package. PCO has been responding to fans on X today, expressing his frustration with the new TNA management team that took over after Scott D'Amour's departure last year. PCO, and okay, so here's the thing. I understand, again, why he's doing this. But I don't understand why PCO was out there responding to Twitter randos. Right? I don't know why he's doing this. But again, adds more layers to this delectable story. Eventually you will understand. I am a fan of the Hardys, and that roster is so awesome. The production team and creative team in TNA, just so good. The new management, that's what EHHNN sounds like. Scott D'Amour was the architect. You need to get your evidence before judging. He added, time will tell the full story and it won't be pretty. So, you need to get your evidence before judging. Just say it. See, this is what I fucking hate about pro wrestlers when they do this kind of stuff, right? When they go on Twitter and they say, false, you shouldn't seek the truth. You shouldn't be listening to so-and-so. One day the record will be set straight. I'm like, brother, do it. Just do it. Do it. Set the record straight. Because wrestlers will talk to dirt sheet reporters under the guise of anonymity, right? Well, they say, oh, you can't put my name on this, and that's fine. But then, stuff starts happening. Shit starts getting published about them, and it's like, oh, you can't believe them. Get your facts straight. What are the facts? We don't know what the facts are. In fact, we don't know what's going on. You're unhappy. TNA's not saying a thing. What? All right. Tell us your side then, PCO. Let us in on it. Clearly, you're not happy. We're going to talk. He explains it a little bit. He gives us some insight. But it's like, check your facts, brother. There's no facts because no one ever talks. No one ever talks on the fucking record in pro wrestling. So there are no facts. And this was your opportunity to do it. And instead, you're just playing, the truth will come out. Will it? He had this other post saying, people don't care for victims. They care for the ones who stand up and monsters their way through. I'm not even sure what that means. PCO also confirmed a report from our own Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio last month that TNA was asking wrestlers to take pay cuts. 7,100 pay cut. So 30% pay cut? And he says, ask Rhino. He also responded to Body Slam's comments that Scott D'Amour had promised PCO a run with the TNA World Championship. And he responded this, get your story straight, Gerard. It was supposed to be for Rebellion, not Slammiversary. The story had moved on. People talk shit and they don't know half the stories. After the PCO versus AJ Francis match, 1,000 people left the building, which is kind of true. Once PCO's match happened in Slammiversary, there were, I don't know if it was 1,000, but there were a lot of walkouts. People were like, we thought PCO were good. We can go home now. I agree with him on that. That you can actually see it. It's observable. But again, it's like, get your story straight. People talk shit. They don't know half the stories. And tell us, stop being so fucking cagey and go on the record. But that's it. No one goes on record. So what do fans do? They do exactly what fans are doing, right? He later noted that he was not supposed to be to beat, I guess, Nick Nemeth for the belt. Writing, not Nick, and it was a few days run, but you seems to know more than me. Scott is the architect of the rebranding of TNA. The new management haven't any experience in the wrestling business. In regards to some of the world championship title allegations, right? Mike Gilbert from the Mike and JD podcast, when he was on appearance on the Flagship Plus, which is the Voice of Wrestling flagship paywall, Gilbert had said that PCO had heat with TNA management because he was indeed promised a world title run, and they hadn't been keeping up their side of the deal. And Gilbert went on to note that the international heavyweight title that PCO brought out at Slammiversary, which is the international title that belonged to Lutte Internationale back in the 80s, International Wrestling, the Gino Brito's promotion out of Montreal. The reason he came out, they included that in the angle, was kind of like a make good on the promise that Scott D'Amore had made him, but clearly that management wasn't going to honor moving forward. And even there, Mike Gilbert said, PCO's probably done with the company. So all of these things coming together, you're starting to piece, you can get a picture of how things were coming together here. The pay cut, it's always about money. Most of the time in this stuff, it's about money. So the pay cut was clearly an issue, and the broken promises, right? There's the broken promises that happen throughout all of this as well, where you're like, well, goddamn, it's just like this. What are you going to do? Wrestlers are going to be wrestlers. And I appreciate the true old school bridge burning here that PCO has done. Like that, it's just tremendous. I don't think he's not coming back. I don't know what they're going to do with the title. It doesn't matter. The one thing, because of course, like this all turns into conversation, right? All this turns into big talk, big dialogue online, right? And I think one of the things that, I think it's okay to just be into this because of the sloppy, petty stuff coming into public view in the most pro wrestling way possible. This is why I'm into it, right? I'm not into it because PCO is some kind of super worker, because he still has so much to give, because the man is pushing 60, right? He's 57 years old. He's pushing 60, 57. His body is so broken down from all of the insane shit he's been doing. He doesn't have much left. He doesn't have much left to give. Why are we sitting here pretending? When I say we, I mean a lot of people, a lot of folks, pretending that Pierre-Carl Ouellette has so much left, like he's this great performer, this great wrestler, and that a great injustice has been done. I'm like, at this point, honestly, it's fine. PCO had his time, and he retired for a little while, came back doing the Frankenstein shit, right? And then leaned into the fact that he's an old guy, he's broken down, but he still does batshit crazy nonsense. That's what he leaned into. And that's what added on more years to his career. But we're not going to pretend like this is some great travesty, that this is TNA fucking up. Like, it's not cool what they did. If they're like, you're taking a pay cut, and not honoring promises that were made, like all that is bullshit, right? But the one part of this discourse that I can't get into is like, PCO, what a jam up guy. It's like if anything, we have the proof right here. He's a worker. He's a top tier worker. And he to the point where it's like, that he knows how to get at the people he's pissed off at to really piss them off. He gets it, and he knows what he's doing. He's burning the bridge, and no one forced him to do it, as far as we know. No one forced him to drag a sledgehammer down to Hammerstein and try to destroy a belt. Like, no one forced him to do that. I'm talking about this, and I think it's great because of how messy it is, because of how sloppy it is. It's just messy, sloppy, fantastic pro wrestling drama. Just like pro wrestling is intended to bring out sometimes. And I think a lot of fans are just, since a lot of them are new fans, are shocked at this because how, controlled and asepticized everything is now. Whereas back in the day, like Chad is pointing out, right? Stan Hansen doing it to the AWA back in the day. Like, you've been around the block a couple of times. You're like, yeah, this rules. This is great. This is great. But I'm not going to sit here and bemoan the mistreatment of PCO. It doesn't make sense on that front. But everything that happened in front of the camera, everything that happened at GCW, man, that was tremendous. That's just tremendous. That's just tremendous stuff. Legitimately, absolutely, 100% tremendous stuff. And that about does it this week for another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening, especially to the very end. I appreciate it tremendously. One more little pitch on my end for a like on the video, or a subscription, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or a 5-star rating on Spotify. Anything that you can do, it's tremendous. I will be back with the AEW Dynamite review. Why was I blanking out on it? The AEW review tomorrow on Thursday. Also back to live streaming on youtube.com/MrWarrenHayes on Thursday. These days, the schedule is pretty much a Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday is when we pop on streams, and it's more often than not a really good time. So I'd love to have you there if you can, and if you can't, well, that's fine. You can enjoy the podcast on your own accord without any issue. So thank you again very much for being here, and I want to thank Mike Gilbert one last time for joining me today on the show. Go watch some Randy Orton and get back to me, and I will see you next time.